हेलो फ्रेंड्स, आज हम बात करेंगे करेंगे सबसे पहले what is the definition and what are the type of economics. Then we'll talk about economic problem, we'll talk about scarcity, we'll talk about the decision making process, and we'll talk about economic principles. Now let's start with definition and economics, definition and type of economics. So सबसे पहले अगर हमें समझना है what is economics. In terms of economics, when we discuss, we start with Mr. Adam Smith. एक्चुअली इनको हम फादर ऑफ इकोनॉमिक्स भी कह सकते हैं. इन्होंने सबसे पहले ईयर 1776 में अपनी बुक पब्लिश की थी वेल्थ ऑफ नेशंस, जहां पर इन्होंने बताया कि व्हाट इज इकोनॉमिक्स. अकॉर्डिंग टू हिम इकोनॉमिक्स का फोकस जो है वो हाउ टू मैक्सिमाइज द वेल्थ ऑफ अ नेशन है. बट देन इनके अराउंड 114 साल बाद एक और इकोनॉमिस्ट आए जिनका नाम हम बोलते हैं अल्फ्रेड मार्शल, जिन्होंने बोला कि नहीं, इट इज नॉट जस्ट अबाउट द maximizing the wealth, but what he said कि इकोनॉमिक्स जो है वो आपका एक कंसेप्ट है जिसमें कि हम we are not talking about only on the nation, but हम लोग बात करते हैं एक किसी भी इंडिविजुअल की या सोसाइटी की वेल्थ को कैसे मैनेज किया जाए. नॉट जस्ट हाउ यू बाई इट बट हाउ यू स्पेंड इट ऑल्सो. सो इट इज नॉट अबाउट द मैक्सिमाइजेशन ऑफ वेल्थ बट हाउ टू मैनेज योर वेल्थ. Just not earning the wealth or maximizing the wealth, but also how to spend, which is the book that he wrote called Principle of Economics in year 1890. Then after him, around 35 years, between 35 years, another person, Robbins, who has a different terminology. He said, no, it's not just about managing the wealth, but also you need to understand that it is the nature, it is the science that talks about ants and stars, how meeting the needs of the people will come into the picture, and that's how economics definition has further evolved. After him, around 15-16 years later, in year 1948, the book called Economics, written by Paul A. Samuelson, wherein he also further enhanced his definition, talking about not just about money. It is about any resource that you use. You need to do the cost-benefit analysis of that to achieve the right result. So this is how your definition of economics has evolved. So if we say this is the business economy, then what is managerial economy? This is economics. Then what is a business economics? In business economics, you focus on optimal use of resources, as we have seen in the previous definition. Now, but then what is the economic functions? We need to understand them first, and then they should be performed efficiently to benefit the society as well as individuals in the current as well as future needs. We will not focus on today only, but we need to focus on future as well. Wherein the functions are production, consumption, disruption, and exchange. All these functions are called economic functions. That's how you produce your product, how the product is getting consumed, how it is getting disrupted, and how it is getting exchanged. So it can be in form of money. Money is also, again, money is not something, I would say, it is not a product. It is also a product in itself. Now, optimal production and disruption decisions can be made using the economic concept and principle, which we will discuss later in this video. Now, moving on. What is managerial economics? We talked about business economics. What is managerial economics? From a managerial economics perspective, there was a person, Joel Dean, who said it is the integration of economics into managerial decision making that makes it managerial economics. Now, the purpose of this economics is to show how economic analysis can be used to formulate business policies. Because ultimately, if you look at economics, cannot just directly jump into your business, into managerials. Managerials are decided by the policies, and that is where you use the managerial, create the policies using this economics analysis. Again, the objective of that is also to analyze the business problem. When you have a business and its problem you have as a managerial problem, you need to resolve them. To resolve them, you need to study and analyze the economic problem of the business and provide a solution. And that will help a manager taking a decision. That is the overall purpose of managerial economics. Now, if you take most of the business decisions are taken by executives or top level management. Now, wherein there is a problem of logic, which is between the different economic theories, and then there is a problem of policy, which is talking about ethical management issues. There is a big gap between them. Now, what is managerial economics? In simple word to understand is something that bridges this gap and help managers to decide the effective policies. As you can see in the purpose of managerial economics as well, is nothing but your uh, what I would say or managerial economics is. So that is something managerial economics is called. Then let's discuss about what are the different type of economics. Once we understand that what is economics, let's get into the type of economics. Type of economics include macroeconomics and microeconomics. Macroeconomics is started in 1930s, but that was a micro. Microeconomics, as the name itself is, it's very micro, it's very small in nature. It studies the individual entities such as a firm, a consumer, a pricing of goods or products or service, pricing of individual inputs of production, a specific market where you are actually trying to sell your product. But then macroeconomics is a study of aggregate. It does not include any individual. For example, you analyze one of your customer, one of your consumer, it is a microeconomics. But when you take how your customer pool is, when you analyze your multiple customers into one, or when you analyze your multiple consumers into one, that study is going into macroeconomics, wherein what we discuss is typically nature of the business, relationship, what you deal with them, what is the behavior, what is the average quantities, economic quantities of those things, such as like when our government creates a budget, they take the 130 crores of Indians. So that is kind of macroeconomic. They don't go for each individual, otherwise they will get diversified and they will not reach to a conclusion. So individual economics is good to focus on one customer, while macroeconomics. Now let's take an example. If you're a firm, you want to study a firm. It is in microeconomics, but it is in microeconomics. But at the same time, it needs to decide its policies based on macroeconomics, because they have to analyze the market, they have to analyze the studies, and then those macroeconomic things like what is your nature of business, what is your relationship with your customers, what is the customer behavior, what kind of quantities they order. Based on that, you choose and decide what kind of policies you will frame as that organization. Now, let's move on to economic problem and scarcity. Let's understand what is an economic problem. We talk about economics, we talk about what is the different type of economics, but why to use the economics? It is because there is an economic problem. What is an economic problem? Like, let's take an example. If you are an individual or I am an individual, so what I will do is I will have to consume goods or services which I want to utilize, but I have to keep in mind that what is the price of these products, whether they are cost benefit for me, whether because I have a limited income. Now, if I take the same thing for a producer or a manufacturer, let's take an example. Now, a manufacturer has to try to achieve the objective of his or her organization. Now, this organization, we all know what is the objective, so we will not get into that. But there is always a resource constraint that he always have a limited resources. Like we want to use the goods and services, we need to keep the price in mind, and we have a limited income. Similarly, he has limited resources. What are the resources? We'll discuss later on what different kind of resources that we use. Then, for a firm or an organization perspective to take, they strive to maximize profitability or minimize the production cost. Ultimate objective is to increase the profit. But then it can be understand, like if either you increase your profitability or you reduce your cost, automatically your profit will increase. So ultimately, objective is to maximize the profitability. Now, to achieve this, they have a limited availability. These resources can be physical, natural, or human. Any kind of resources. Then can we say these are the constraints they give rise to a problem of decision making, and that is something called economic problem. Now let's understand what is scarcity. To understand scarcity, we need to understand what is scarcity uh, as a definition, and then we'll talk about the different factors. So scarcity is nothing but when you have inadequate availability of resources, you call it a scarcity, which is derived from needs and wants from a specific people of group. For example, अगर आप एक firm है जिसके different customers हैं, उन customer की needs and wants will become the requirement, and if you have limited resources to fulfill that, that is your scarcity problem. So it is more of a relative problem. For example, if you take an example in Noida में इतने flats हैं, then you don't have a scarcity of flats for the buyers because there are plenty of flats available and plenty of are in making. So it is not a problem scarcity. there is no problem. But then scarcity was there in the same area in years back, when you went for 5-10 years down the line, prior to today, it was a big problem. So it is a relative term. Now, what is the problem of scarcity? Problem of scarcity is to make the choices. How to make the choices? You have a resources is scarce when the demand is more than a supply. If demand is high, supply is low, then definitely that is where you have a scarcity problem. And then if there is no problem, but if at the same time, if you have higher supply than and lower demand, there is no problem. But if you really take an example, human desires are like, you have one, you get it fulfilled. You have another. For example, 5 years back, I was having the desire of 2 BHK of my own. Today, I want to have 3 BHK. Then okay, if I have 3 BHK, few years down the line, I will feel like a 4 BHK or a mansion or villa. So the desires keep on increasing, and that is what the problem is, because resources are limited. Even though I want to buy more and more, but if you look at the house or mansions are very less, so how do you fulfill that requirement? Now, from a consumer, now let's understand the choice or problem of choice from a consumer perspective. कंज्यूमर की प्रॉब्लम है अनलिमिटेड डिजायर। उसको वो क्या कर सकता है कि अपनी इंपॉर्टेंस या प्रेफरेंस के बेस पर रैंक कर सकता है। ऑब्वियसली उनको उसको सेटिस्फाई करने के लिए उसके पास हमेशा लिमिटेड बच सकता है। तो वो क्या करता है, अपनी डिजायर्स को प्रायोरिटाइज करता है कि ओके, आई हैव 5 डिजायर्स, आई विल पिक दिस वन। फॉर एग्जांपल, मेरी डिजायर है यार, मेरे को ना मेंशन चाहिए, अंबानी के जैसा घर चाहिए, बट देन आई हैव लिमिटेड मनी। एट द सेम टाइम मेरे को रहने के लिए घर भी चाहिए। So what I will do is, today I'll say, okay, fine, I'll adjust on my cost because I have limited money and I have to prioritize. Okay, I need a house. That is first example. Another thing is, I want to buy a house, I want to buy a car, I want to buy a bike. Now I need to prioritize. Okay, what is the money I have in mind? Okay, car is a basic necessity, so I'll buy the house first, and I'll wait for car or bike, and then when I'll have money, I'll first maybe buy car or bike according to my need, the way I prioritize it, or that's how I'll wait. Similar way, a firm, it has its own objective. Now they have to pursue those because that's the whole purpose of that organization. To achieve that, they will list them as priorities. They will have them resource allocated to them to achieve them, and then you look for them is that what is the different objective of a firm, and to achieve those objectives, they will have to prioritize their objectives. Now, typically what happens is, you cannot achieve all your objectives. We all know the basic objective is profit maximization. But what they can do is, they can achieve it through various alternate objectives, which includes, it can be prioritized because obviously you cannot achieve those as well, like sales revenue optimization or increasing the growth maximization of the organization, managerial utility function का utilization और long term survival. तो इनमें से कुछ भी आपको करना हो तो आपको basically all these leads to your profit maximization, but you have to prioritize them as well because you cannot achieve all of them together. So that is how a consumer or a firm are interrelated. So you can take any of these things into context of a consumer or a firm. Now, what is scarcity and economic problem? How they are related? We discuss what economic problem is about. Scarcity is also a problem of distinction. So what is the basic problem, or what is the basic problem of decision making is, you have always end. You have a desire or objective of a firm. Then you have being, the resources or factor input. This is where your scarcity arises. This scarcity generates your economic problem of choice. Now, let's understand what are these resources. One is availability, which includes or other natural resources. You can classify them renewable, non-renewable, but then yes, you need a land or natural resources, which is called as land in terms of economics. Second thing is labor. There is a physical personality or physical needs or physical human resource count, right? And how their efforts goes into. Then you have capital, which includes your human infrastructure such as machines, airports, ports, hospitals, money. So whatever is built by human. Then comes the entrepreneurial ability. This is something, is a special ability of an individual who combine his knowledge and effort to achieve these results, or to provide his product or services to the consumer. This is very special. So these four things as a skill or activities or terminologies, I can say, is something called as resources. Now, these are the resources that, but again, the problem is they are constrained because we said at the point we have limited resources. So, what is these limited resources? There are internal, we have just talked about, and then there are external resources such as political legal constraints or regulations of international bodies. It is easy. One easy way I can tell you is case analysis, wherein P stands for political, E stands for environmental, S stands for social, T for technical, L for legal, and E for economic. If you remember this term, this will always help you. What could be the external factors that can affect your, or what are the constraints that can affect your decision making? So these decisions are sometimes considered synonyms to maximization because they are so exhaustive and significant in terms of making business decisions. That's why people do get confused, or they are sometimes referred to as the synonyms of maximization. What are these things? What they maximize? They either maximize the output, they minimize the cost, or sometimes they do for trade-off. Like you can see the example in terms of trade-off. You take one thing over the other. Okay, for example, you are into a manufacturing plant and you are manufacturing multiple products. You choose, okay, I'll produce this one at this month, and then the other one I'll choose next month because they have a similar kind of nature, and you can choose one over the above. That's kind of a trade-off thing. So these are the decisions that it can help. Really, these constraints can help. So you need to optimize based on your knowledge and ability. Obviously, as we talked about, managerial ability is one of the key factors as internal factor. So now, what is a decision making process? It's very simple. It is a 5-step process. First, you have to establish the objective of your organization. Once the objective is finalized, you define your problem, what exactly your problem is, like we define in our previous example. Then once your problem is identified, you have to identify the alternative. What are the choices that you have? Then choose the best alternative. You can use different techniques which we will talk about in some other video. And then once you have identified the alternative, you implement that decision, or just finally decide what you are going to take. Now, decision making and decision taking are two different things. Decision taking is different and decision making is different. Decision making is a much more complex process than decision taking. Now, what are the different economic principles? So, first we need to understand what is economics and how it impacts. I think we have discussed a lot, but just understand. First question that we need to answer is what and how much to produce. Here, we need to keep in mind what are the product. It is a product-based decision. It is a decision on the product or service. Consumer demand, that is something that tells you that what you have to produce and how much you have to produce. Then demand elasticity guide can help you achieve that. Then once you've decided what and how to produce, you have to choose how to produce. Basically, we can say how you allocate your resources, resource related decisions, product and cost analysis. Then once you choose and how, for whom you are producing, it is for the consumer. So you need to understand market segment decisions, that which market segment you are going to target. For example, Tata is targeting the middle class, while Audi or your Ferraris are for the high class. So again, that kind of a decision has to be decided because you need to choose your market segment. Then these decisions has to be taken based on economic principles. They really help you to achieve. Some of these economic principles that we are going to discuss today are managerial and marginal or incremental principles. Then we'll talk about Equi-Marginalism or Equi-Marginal principle. Then we'll talk about opportunity cost principle, and then time perspective principle and discounting principle. So let's take them one by one. Marginal or incremental. So marginal is, like you can see, basically if you take them, these principle takes help in existing set of products. You want to increase, you want to add a new product into your bucket, for which you may have the additional cost or something. You need to decide. So for them, it is a decision that tells you, this principle tells you a decision is profitable when either it increases the revenue more than your cost, or it decreases some cost while compared to other increase in other costs. Then it increases some revenue more than it decreases others. And then, or last but not the least, it reduces cost more than other revenue. So these are the categories when you choose your decision is profitable. Let's take an example. So you have a product X and Y already in production. Now you look at these costs There is a cost for labor, there is a cost for material, there is a cost for overhead. Then you want to have selling and administration cost, the total cost is 3,900. But then actually this product is going to sell at cost of 3,300. So at a first go, you see that it is a loss because it is not increasing. The cost is higher than the price. But then when you realize that selling and administration cost is already existing, you need not to repay that again. Even overhead cost may also have certain reductions. Then suddenly your cost reduces. Forget about overhead cost. Selling and administration itself is reducing 800. So your cost becomes 3,100. Now 3,300 it is still making a 200 rupees profit. So you should go for this decision. That is called marginal analysis. Then another example is equi-marginal. As the name itself says, you need to focus on equal margins or making the margins or equalization. Equalization is the focus. Now I'll take an example. You have a businessman with 4 entities. You have book publishing, you have notebook manufacturing, you have ball pens manufacturing, and you have retail shop. And you have 100 employees. How you want to deploy? See, we need to understand on retail shop you don't need too many people because the retail shop is very small shop. 3 or 4 or 5 people can manage the business. Then coming to the book publishing. Again, this is an annual activity. You need not to invest too much effort into it because once it is published, then year on year people do buy old books. People use old books. They go to libraries and read those. So really don't think books publishing is also a major area. Notebooks manufacturing, definitely yes. This is something required, but not that frequency like a pen because pens are more required or frequently buy. You when you study मतलब जब मैं पढ़ता था मैं तो एक महीने में 3-3 4-4 पेन खरीद लेता था. नोटबुक्स मेरी शायद 2 महीने में एक बार लेता हूँ. बुक्स तो साल में एक बार. So how I segregate them? मैं 5 रुपये रिटेल में लगा दी. So basically I have to percentagealize that where my maximum. Ideally speaking मेरे ये करना चाहिए. चार ट्रेड्स हैं इक्वली डिवाइड कर दो 25-25. But then that doesn't make sense because that is not giving me equal margins. Because retail shop पे मैं 25 लोग लगा के करूंगा उसमें. Similarly, मैं बुक्स पब्लिशिंग में 25 लोग लगा करके मेरा प्रोडक्शन इतना ही बढ़ा भी लूँ तो मेरा फायदा नहीं हो. Similar way. So now let's understand what is economic principle. These principle includes other principle, opportunity cost principle. Opportunity cost principle is a subjective decision. Basically, जब हमारे पास हम 2 डिसीजन लेते हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल अगर आपको आपके पास 2 जॉब ऑफर्स हैं, आप चूज करते हो डिफरेंट एनालिसिस लगा करके, तो उसमें से जिस ऑप्शन को आप चूज करते हो और उसके जो नेक्स्ट बेस्ट ऑप्शन था और उन दोनों को कंपेयर करोगे तो दैट इज द कॉस्ट ऑफ द नेक्स्ट बेस्ट ऑल्टरनेटिव इज कॉल्ड द अपॉर्चुनिटी कॉस्ट. फॉर एग्जांपल मेरे को चाय पीनी है या कॉफी पीनी है. ओके, मैं चाय लवर हूं तो मैंने चाय चूज किया. तो कॉफी का जो कॉस्ट है वो मेरा अपॉर्चुनिटी कॉस्ट है. सो बेसिकली मैंने कॉफी सेक्रीफाइस की चाय पीने के. सो दैट इज कॉल्ड अपॉर्चुनिटी कॉस्ट प्रिंसिपल. इसका मैंने शायद बहुत ज्यादा यूज कहीं देखा नहीं. नेक्स्ट एग्जांपल इज टाइम पर्सपेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल. यहाँ पर एक मैनेजर को कंसीडर करना चाहिए शॉर्ट टर्म गोल्स एंड लॉन्ग टर्म गोल्स. फॉर एग्जांपल अभी मेरे को एक रिसोर्स का शॉर्टेज है तो मैं अभी मार्केट से कोई भी रिसोर्स ले लूंगा. लॉन्ग टर्म में मैं क्या कर सकता हूँ कि ओके फाइन, मैं एक फ्रेशर को लेकर के उसे ग्रूम करूँ ओवर ए पीरियड ऑफ टाइम एंड will keep his momentum going on. He will have his from the start to long term with me. So those kind of decisions I have to take, which I have to decide based on the time that what kind of need I have. Do I need an instant resource or I need a long term resource? So that way I have to think. Then discounting principle. Discounting principle बहुत सिंपल सा बहुत कि आज के 1 रुपए की वैल्यू अगर मेरे को वो पैसा 4 साल बाद मिलने वाला है तो मैं उसे 1 रुपए में कंसिडर नहीं कर सकता क्योंकि मुझे 1 रुपए के कॉस्ट में वो 4 साल बाद मिलेगा. तो आज उसे अगर मुझे 10% रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट से बेनिफिट लगाऊं तो 0.68 रुपीज बैठेगा वो आज. यानी कि अगर मुझे वो आज 1 रुपए मिलता तो वो 1 रुपए होता, लेकिन अगर 4 साल बाद मिलेगा तो 0.68 होगा अगर मैं 10% का रेट ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन इंडेक्स भी कंसिडर करूं, इन्फ्लेशन रेट. So that is called discounting principle की वैल्यू शुड बी कंसिडर फॉर टुडे. अगर फ्यूचर डेट पे तो फ्यूचर डेट की वैल्यू कंसिडर करनी चाहिए. समटाइम्स इवन जैसे कि हमारे ईएमआईज में होता है, उसमें एक बार में डिसाइड कर दिया डिवाइड कर. So that is not using the discounting. लेकिन अगर आप यही चीज when you go for a सिनेरियो जहाँ पे आप कॉन्ट्रैक्ट बनाते हो कि हमें एक महीने का मार्जिन के पेमेंट है तो वहाँ पे आपको डिस्काउंटिंग का कंसेप्ट दिमाग में रखते हुए उस कॉस्ट को उतना एक्स्ट्रा बढ़ाना पड़ता है. So that is how you need to think of it. So for example अगर आपका कस्टमर बोलता है कि आपको every 4 years I'll pay और every 4 months I'll pay and उसका 10% का इन्फ्लेशन इंडेक्स होगा 0.68 रुपीज is equal to 1 rupee at that time. So you need to consider कि उसे 1.46 rupees आप मांगो after 4 months, not 1 rupee, because that is how it will be equivalent. So let's just summarize what we have discussed. We've discussed microeconomics, macroeconomics, economic problems, scarcity, constraint problems, trade-offs, decision making, marginal analysis, equi-marginalism, opportunity cost, time perspective principle, and discounting. With that being said, we'll wrap up for today. Thank you. Thank you very much, guys.